Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, for a tutorial video today. Feels like a while since I've done one of these. Anyway, in the most recent episode of building a modular model railway, I had a go at building an embankment. It turned out really well, and there's a link just up here if you want to take a look for yourself. But there was one section I sort of skipped over because I felt like it deserved its own little video. That, of course, was building the occupational bridge that the railway line crossed over. I made mine using a plastic wheels kit from PECO, and before I put this kit together, I had a quick look online to see if anyone else had built one of these before, but I couldn't find any videos or even any photos or blog posts about this kit. So I figured what I'd do today is I'd show you how I put this kit together, and maybe it'll be of use to anyone else out there who is also wanting to use this bridge kit on their layout in the future. So with that said, let's head over to the workbench and jump right in. This is the packet the bridge comes in, and as you'll see in a moment, it's a nice simple kit to put together. Here you can see some of the pieces that make up the bridge, and I'm going to start by assembling the interior sidewalls first. Essentially, there are two pieces that need to be joined using this little back piece that I'm running the glue down. The two walls will then stick to this piece side by side, making sure that the embossed pattern is on the front and the joining piece is on the back. You may notice that there are some notches on the corners of the wall pieces too, and you need to make sure that these are at the top, as this is where the bridge girders will fit later on. With the two wall pieces glued together, there's also a front piece to cover up the join that will strengthen the sections too. Again, one end of this piece has a slight lip, which you want to be at the top again to support the rest of the structure. With one wall built, this process can then be repeated for its companion on the opposite side. And for anyone wondering, I'm just using the standard Revell plastic glue for this, nothing fancy, although the fine tip on this glue is very useful. As always, there are links in the description to everything I'm using today. Next, it's time to assemble the girders that will run parallel to the track, and these are probably the most difficult parts to get your head around. It looks a bit complicated initially, but essentially there are three parts to join together. This short strip first needs to be glued at a right angle along the short side of the girder piece. And there's little raised details along the length to guide you into the correct position. The same is then repeated for the longer strip on the other side. And basically the side profile of this should resemble a capital I. You also want to make sure that you get the orientation of each piece right too, so that the detail is always facing outwards. And this is basically what one part looks like when it's done. Next, we have some handrails to fit along the top, so these need to be cut away from the sprue. They can then be glued in place on the girder, matching up with the moulded detail along the side. And don't forget, this whole process needs to be repeated again to create the opposite side of the bridge too. Now it's time to assemble the whole thing. First, I'll add some glue to those notches at the top of the wall I mentioned earlier. The girder then sits down into these notches. And initially it'll feel a bit flimsy and delicate, but as you get the second side in, it'll start to become a bit more solid. And don't forget, the wall texture needs to be facing inwards, not outwards. Finally, there is another girder piece that gets glued in the middle too. And this just sits on the lip created by the central strips of walling up the middle. That's the building process complete, but obviously to finish this kit off properly, it needs painting. This part is really up to you, but I'll quickly show you a really simple technique I use to get great results. Start off by covering all the stonework in a cream colour. You really want to get into all the nooks and crannies here, as this is going to be our base colour. Once the cream is fully dry, you then go back over it with a grey colour. What you want to do here is dry brush this on so that the cream shows through the gaps between the stones. Dry brushing is essentially when you have barely any paint on your brush at all and you just lightly dust it onto the model, allowing small flecks of paint to catch in all the recesses. And this technique also gives the appearance of adding a little bit of extra texture to the stone moulding too. Of course, if you add too much by accident, you can always use a tissue to dab away any excess. And you may want to do this anyway for some added variation. Don't forget, you're allowed to have fun and experiment, so don't be afraid of doing things in your own way. For the metal girders, I'll just give the plastic a rough coat of brown paint to simulate some dirt and grime that has built up over years of use. For this, I'm using Rail Match Sleeper Grime. In fact, this is the same paint I use for the rail sides on the track, and it makes sense that this would be the same grime on the bridge too. Most importantly though, this paint has a nice matte finish to it, which really tones down the shiny plastic and stops it looking like a toy. Personally, I don't tend to go too overboard with this. Generally, I'll just add a small splodge of paint and then use the brush to work it into the area. And don't forget to do the top of the girders too, just for some added extra detail. When it comes to installing the bridge on your layout, this will really depend on how your track and baseboards are constructed. In my case, I have the track raised up on a custom embankment I made so that the bridge would clip in underneath. You could also cut a hole into your baseboard and sink the bridge down into it, but that's a bit more involved. Either way, you'll need something to support the track across the bridge as the top is left open, but this could literally be something as simple as a piece of card that you later cover with ballast. Once you've built up the landscape around the bridge, the wing walls can be added into position too. I actually glue these to the baseboard rather than to the rest of the bridge, and doing them afterwards like this allows me to shape the landscape how I want, then put the wings where they're needed. You'll notice I've used the same painting technique as the interior walls for these, and ideally you want to do them all at the same time so that you get a consistent look. With everything now in position, the rest of the scenics can then be built up around the bridge. You can see some of the things I've done here, but obviously I covered this in much more detail in the main video where I built this module, so do check that out if you want some more information. With that though, the bridge is complete and you can see how great this looks on the layout. It's really nice to have the trains running over this section with the track raised up above the scenics, and this little occupational bridge is a great little kit, especially for beginners. Hopefully you guys have found this video useful, and don't forget, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon as well to get notifications when new videos are released. That's it for today though, so thank you so much for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!